Happy New Year to you all. A Premier League victory to kick off 2025 in style. On today's podcast, we're going to discuss the significance of the 3-1 win at Brentford, the sickness bug that wreaked havoc within the squad in the lead up, and what we learned about Mikel Arteta's men. All of that to come and more on this episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Hey everybody, how are we doing? Happy New Year. Welcome back to the pod. Hope you've all had a wonderful festive period. It is over now though. We are back to normal, back to routine. I certainly felt it this morning when I had to sort of get back into routine in terms of, I beg your pardon, the time I got up, and then you've got the kids who are sort of running around crazy and you're trying to bring their bedtimes back down to what they normally are so that when they go back to school in a few days, they're okay and they can manage it. It's all a bit of a nightmare. It's all a little bit unsettling in a nice way, but you do have to try and get back to routine. And that's what I'm doing at the minute. And I've got to say, even me, I struggled to get up this morning. I normally don't have that problem. I do love this, though, from Gooner73, who says, good to see Harry keeping up his tradition of impeccable timekeeping for 2025. Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. Let me say a few hellos before we get into today's show. We got quite a bit to unpack, I think, from the victory at Brentford. Big hello to Christoph. We've got Mario who's with us. Evan, Arsenal Avenger. Modestos joins us from Cyprus. We've got Glenn. Rowan is with us. I mentioned Gooner73 already. We've got Gilfie, Tom, Iginoba, Junior Gunner. There's lots and lots of you in the live chat. If I run through all of the names, we'll do nothing else. Big Happy New Year to Robert as well, who's also in the live chat. Good to see you, mate. And Happy New Year to you and your families, of course. Right. Let's start unpacking yesterday's game, because I think this is a game that going into it, I was a little bit nervous. I was a little bit concerned. And because of New Year's Eve and New Year's Day, we didn't get around to doing our kind of full preview podcast. But it was a fixture that I was a little bit nervous about. You looked at Brentford's really, really strong home record. That was a cause for concern. The fact that Brentford are really, really good, I think, at stifling opposition. Now, they don't do it in necessarily the same way as an Everton, for instance, who are a lot more, I think, defensive in their approach. Brentford are certainly more willing to go after you and go at you. But they are an unsettling team to play against. And I think that's been one of the key features for Thomas Frank's side since they came up into the Premier League. And it's what's made them competitive. And it's what's put them on a footing this season where I think actually they're probably going to avoid the drop really, really comfortably. And when you think about all the talk around them when Ivan Toney left, that's quite remarkable, really, isn't it? So going into the game, I was a little bit worried. I was a little bit concerned. And obviously we've seen Arsenal blow hot and cold this season. We've seen performances where we've turned up and blown opposition away and put 4s in and 5s in, and it was great. And then we've had games where we've really, really struggled to create, and we've dominated possession, had loads of the ball, but not necessarily been able to turn that into anything more. And I got to say, when we started the game having all of the ball and looking in control, and then we go and concede a goal like we did to Brian Mbuemo, it did, for me, feel all too similar to the Fulham game. And I started to worry at that point, I got to be honest. Now, as I mentioned in the Patreon pod last night, I did miss the first, I want to say 18 to 20 minutes of the game. I was listening to it on the radio, but I was driving home from the game that I was covering. And so I did miss a little bit of the beginning of the game. And I was listening to it, but as I keep saying, it's not the same, right? You don't understand sort of every detail of a game when you're listening via the radio, regardless of how good the commentary was. And it was great. I was listening on BBC Radio London. It was fantastic. But you don't see every pass. You don't see every action because something will happen. They'll speak about it. They go off on tangents, as do all commentators. And so you do miss elements of the game. And so it was difficult for me to kind of get a read on how good or bad we were playing in that first sort of 20 minutes. But I did watch it last night. After the game concluded, I went back and watched the first 20 minutes shortly after I'd released the Patreon pod. And it was very similar to the Fulham game. Lots of possession, lots of the ball, but not really a great deal of creativity on show. Thankfully, it didn't turn out to be like that. And I think there are a number of reasons for that, and we'll come on to those as we work our way through the pod. But I think a good place to start is with what happened pre-game. Now, it was leaked that there was a sickness bug within the camp that was causing all sorts of issues. A number of players had been effective. The detail with regards to who was affected was a little bit scarce, but Declan Rice wasn't in the starting lineup. And if Declan Rice isn't, available to start, but he's available from the bench, you're going to ask a question. Unclear to me if it was an injury, if he's still carrying a bit of a problem, if he's still building his fitness back up after the issues that he had recently, or if he was one of the players affected by the bug. From what we understand, Kai Havertz was affected by it and was unwell and was therefore unavailable to Arsenal yesterday. So there was disruption in the lead up. And okay, we only find out about it at the last minute, so it doesn't necessarily dominate the build-up to a game for us. But it will dominate the build-up for Mikel Arteta and for his players and for his team. And going into the game, there was a lot to deal with. There was a lot to sort of concern ourselves with. I mentioned with regards to the starting 11 that Kai Havertz was missing. Rice obviously deemed not fit enough to start. Arteta said, didn't he, recently that Ethan Nwaneri was an option for the right wing. And he backed up his words by starting him there. Fair play. So the game begins and, again, possession, not a great deal of penetration. It did have that feeling. And then Brentford go and take the lead through Bryan Mbuemo, which made it feel even more like the Fulham game where they, against the run of play, broke away. Raul Jimenez, brilliant finish, and we were behind. And all of a sudden that gives the opposition, who now have the lead, greater sort of reason to drop that little bit deeper, to go from a mid block to a low block and to be a little bit more conservative in their approach. Analyzing that goal that Arsenal conceded, when I was listening to it on the radio, it was Calafiori's allowed Mbuemo to turn inside way too easily. That was kind of the narrative that was sort of being peddled around that goal. And whilst I do think that's true, by the way, that's not to take anything away from that. I do think that Ricardo Calafiori allows Mbuemo to cut inside too easily. I do think there's a couple of other elements and aspects to this goal that we ought to have done, or we ought to have dealt with a lot better. So first of all, when the turnover happens, for me, Thomas Partey isn't quite aggressive enough in going to confront Mikkel Damsgaard. Now, I actually think, for what it's worth, by the way, this is not me going after Thomas Partey, because I have to put this in there because I think it's true. I thought Thomas Partey actually had a good game. I thought he had a good game. I thought for the most part, he was dominant. He was controlling. He was quite aggressive as well yesterday, which I like to see. But I feel like with Thomas Partey, we get that from him when he feels fit, if that makes sense. Like when Thomas Partey knows that his condition is good and that he's at it, he's quite happy, isn't he, to step out and be that bit more aggressive and press and harry people. When he's not quite at it, you can see it in his body language and you can see it in his actions. And he does just drop off that little bit deeper at times. This was strange because I thought generally he was quite aggressive and generally he was quite good. If I bring up some of his stats in front of me, 72 touches of the ball, 84% pass accuracy, not bad. Won 6 out of 6 ground duels, won 2 out of 3 aerial duels. He did lose possession on a number of occasions, but that was him trying to play progressive and forward passes, which I don't have a massive issue with. I think that if you ask a player to be creative, then you have to accept that they're going to try passes sometimes that are not always likely to get through and that require an incredible level of accuracy and weight in order for them to be successful. And, asking someone to get that right every single time is completely unrealistic. But so let's start with the pass that gave the ball away. Problem. Partey, I don't think is aggressive enough in the way that he goes to close down Damsgaard. Then Calafiori allows Bryan Mbuemo to cut inside too easily. Look, I understand that he wants to show him on the outside, and so he kind of gets caught in two minds. But for me, it was too easy. But I think the bigger issue and the biggest issue in that goal that we conceded was actually David Raya. Now, it might sound like I'm going after David Raya because he had a really shaky first half, but this was a part of his really shaky first half, in my opinion. Because if you watch the replay back again, when Mbuemo cuts inside, David Raya takes one more little step to his right. He takes one more little skip to the right-hand side. And what that does is it just opens that door for Bryan Mbuemo to hit the near post. And I think this probably comes from David Raya knowing Bryan Mbuemo inside out. He knows exactly what he's about. He's played with him. He'd have faced him many, many times in training. They both played a real significant part in Brentford establishing themselves as a Premier League club. There's probably a really good relationship there. And sometimes when you know someone too well, you go against your instinct. You start to overthink. You start to overcompensate in your mind. And I think he thought that he had Bryan Mbuemo's number. I think he thought that Bryan Mbuemo was going to go for the far post, and he committed to that. And taking that one extra step to his right just left that space for Mbuemo to hit the near post. It's a good finish, take nothing away from him. But I think as a goalkeeper, if you get beaten at your near post like that, you should always be disappointed, and you should always be looking at, what you could have done better. And obviously Raya had another really sort of obvious moment in that first half when Keane Lewis Potter got down the left-hand side, had a shot at goal. It went through Raya's hands. Unfortunately for us, he was able to rectify it by clawing the ball off of the goal line. But it was a strange one for me because David Raya has been generally so assured this season. But away at his former club for the first time, because of course he was ineligible last season as he was still on loan, he did look a little bit all over the place. And I do wonder if narratives are a problem for David Raya. So I'm not saying he can't take pressure, because he's taken pressure many times in the Arsenal goal and he's delivered and he's performed really, really well. But it feels to me like when there's a narrative around David Raya, it gets into his head. So you think back to the Ramsdale times, and obviously there was all that talk about, is Raya better? Is he actually an upgrade? And lots of fans were calling for Ramsdale to play, and Ramsdale's dad was coming out and speaking about it. And there was just so much going on. It felt like that narrative kind of seeped into David Raya's mindset. There was another narrative yesterday because he was going back to his former club for the first time, and he just struggled with it, I think. And he managed to sort of get it together as the game went on. But, you're not always going to be able to recover from those situations. You need your keeper to be alert. You need him to be switched on. I'm not going to go in too hard on it because I think overall this season he's been excellent. And I think you could actually make a case that says that David Raya has been Arsenal's player of the season up until now. I really do think he's been that impressive. But it just feels to me like whenever there's a sort of obvious and quite noisy narrative around David Raya, he struggles a little bit. We got the equaliser on the half-hour mark. Thomas Partey's shot saved by Mark Flecken, and Gabriel Jesus obviously pounced on the rebound with a really instinctive header. That's 6 goals now in his last 4 appearances for the Brazilian. Something has changed with him. Something has changed. Is it as simple as a bit of confidence? Is that how powerful confidence in this sport can be? You could say that. But I think that there's something that's clicked in Gabriel Jesus's mind. There's something that's telling him, you got to be more selfish. It could be something, or it could be someone. It could be one of the coaching staff. You got to be more aggressive in your positioning. You got to be more selfish. You got to put yourself in the position to score goals first and foremost, rather than always looking to get involved early in the build-up, always looking to drop off, go right, go left. And he can do all of those things. And when the confidence is flowing through Gabriel Jesus, that's a big part of his game. But it's always been, for me, about finding the balance between contributing in the way that we know he can to the all-round play, but also making sure that he's where he needs to be when Arsenal have an opportunity to score. And when you're playing as a right winger, you can drift wherever you want. When you're playing as a left winger, you can do the same. Of course, you have defensive responsibilities, but generally you're a lot freer. When you're playing as a centre forward and the ball arrives in that area, if you're not there, you are going to get the stick. And rightly so, because that is your responsibility. And as a centre forward in the modern game, you have to accept that there's going to be large periods where you're not that involved, where you don't touch the ball that much. And Gabriel Jesus has to find that balance between going and getting it, because we all know that that's what his instinct tells him to do, and that's what he naturally veers towards. But he also has to be in the right place at the right time, like all good strikers are. So he scores the goal, and I think that was massive, because when you take the lead, when a team like Brentford, who are the unfancied going into this game, but obviously have enough belief within themselves that they can hurt you and can cause you problems under the lights, etc., you go down a goal, it's really, really important that you respond, and you respond quickly, because the longer you leave it before you respond, the more they grow in confidence. You can't panic and start throwing bodies forward like mad trying to get that equaliser, because you can leave yourself exposed. And we've been on the receiving end of that before, when you push too hard and someone goes down the other end and picks you off. But it was important that we responded, and we responded in the right way, through Gabriel Jesus. And, you know, it was an instinctive header. I think the lead lasted about 15, 16 minutes for Brentford, which isn't a great deal of time. And so there wasn't that time for them to kind of build up that confidence, for them to slowly sink into that kind of deeper, lower block, and start to alter the pattern of the game. They did start the game on the front foot. They did start the game aggressively. And because we responded within 15 or so minutes, we didn't give them the chance to change the pattern of the game. We didn't give them the chance to readjust and re-strategize, if you like. So really good header, really good instinctive header from him. Yeah, I mean, I say something's changed with Gabriel Jesus. And look, the wider story here is that the squad is now contributing. And that's really, really important. And I want you to hold that thought, because we're going to come back to it after we touch on the second and third goals as well. If you've got questions, guys, hold fire on them, because I will get you to throw them in the chat a little bit later on in the pod. So, yeah, bear with me on that. We will get there. But I just want to quickly remind you guys that this podcast, The Chronicles of a Gooner, is partnered at the minute with the brilliant NordVPN. It's the best VPN service out there. It's a service that I personally can't do without anymore. Whether you're looking to stream your favorite Christmas films or all the festive football, NordVPN is the one for you. It is a game changer. You can sign up via the link in the description. Visit nordvpn.com/Chronicles AFC for a mega discount and 4 months free at the end of your plan. Not only does it give me extra protection when surfing the web, downloading or streaming, but I now have the ability to access geo-block content by changing my location virtually with the click of a button. Sign up now via nordvpn.com/Chronicles AFC and take advantage of this amazing offer. Plus, with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, it's totally risk-free. You won't regret it. nordvpn.com/Chronicles AFC. We thank them for their support of the pod. Okay, let's move on to goals 2 and 3 for the Gunners. And the second goal came from, surprise, surprise, an Arsenal corner. Set piece FC, ole, ole. I love hearing that song ring around, because it winds everybody else up so much. Corner comes in, Flecken can't clear. Jesus fires back towards goal, and a ricochet sees it fall into the path of Mikel Merino. Just sticks out a left boot and sort of slices it into the back of the net. And this, for me, highlights the importance of maintaining our level from set pieces, first of all. It highlights the importance of having plenty of bodies in the box and having shots. A shoot on sight policy is really, really important. There were 7 Arsenal players between the penalty spot and the goal, causing Brentford all sorts of issues as that delivery came in. The third goal comes from a Nwaneri delivery into the box. Again, Arsenal have plenty of bodies in the area, and it falls to the Brazilian. He takes it with confidence and then fires home brilliantly. Really impressed with the finish. And look, we used to talk a lot last season, didn't we, about flooding the opposition's box. Add a shoot on sight policy to that, and this is what you get. You don't always have to carve out the perfect opportunity. The brilliance sometimes is in the chaos. And that's what we saw yesterday with the way that Arsenal managed to sort of turn the game around. And look, I don't think that you really need to do too much analysis on Arsenal from sort of minute 54 through until 94 when the game ended. You shouldn't really judge that section of the performance too much unless you're focusing on Arsenal's ability to game manage. We'd taken away the game from the Bees in an 8-minute spell at the start of the second half. And it was all about, from then on, game management, making the necessary changes, managing the minutes of those involved, protecting people, giving people a few minutes where they needed it. And look, the big lesson and the big takeaway from yesterday is the power of the squad. That's, for me, the most important thing. If we were without Kai Havertz 5 or 6 weeks ago, we'd have all been concerned because Jesus wasn't doing the business. He is now. Merino and Martinelli, there have been questions over both of those players, and both of them, again, made vital contributions. And, I've been the first person to question Mikel Merino, and I still don't think he's as all-encompassing as it was kind of sold to me that he was when we first signed him. But if he contributes like that, by putting in solid performances in the midfield, but also gives us an extra body in the box who is ready to pounce and take advantage of any opportunity that comes his way, then, that's a good addition to the squad. And I did say that when we signed him. I did say that there was no guarantee for me that Mikel Merino was a starter. And people were saying, no, he's going to start every single week. The midfield is going to be Rice, Merino, Odegaard. It might be going forward. It might be from next season. But while Partey is there, he's got a big, big say. And he's got a big role to play, in my opinion. So I think the power of the squad is the kind of big thing that I take away from this. And it goes to show that even though sometimes we've looked at these players and they haven't really been performing, in theory, at least, we do have that depth. But that depth needs to prove itself. That depth needs to grab those opportunities when they come their way. And Merino started the game, took the opportunity. Martinelli continues to... I don't want to say this because, is it because he was being overshadowed by Bukayo Saka, but he continues to thrive in Saka's absence? And, that's not to say that I want Saka to be missing, but it does feel like Martinelli having his role slightly changed and tweaked and maybe feeling the pressure of having to be the goals man now is kind of good for him. It's working well for him. So yeah, I'm really, really pleased. And I watched the game obviously last night, and then I watched the first 20 minutes back, and I watched the extended highlights again this morning. And I wasn't massively impressed with Arsenal's performance. I don't think it was amazing. It wasn't like the way we went and tore Palace apart or the way that we went and tore West Ham apart. It wasn't that. It was really, really professional. That's what it was. And sometimes when your backs are against the wall, like ours were yesterday, there was a lot of pressure on Arsenal. The only Premier League game on New Year's Day there was a lot of pressure on us to close the gap on Liverpool to 6. Obviously, they have that game in hand, but we needed to do our bit. And there was a lot of pressure on Arsenal to come back after going behind. And then you think about the squad and how it was on its knees and, the sickness bug and all of that stuff. And so what you then have is a really, really difficult game on your hands, and you just need to get through it. And that's what Arsenal did. And we learned a few things about this team. Mikel Arteta had told us that Ethan Nwaneri, as I said right at the top of the show, was an option on the right and that he can be trusted. And then he backed that up. And Nwaneri then proved him right, in my opinion. Listen, I've seen some Nwaneri compilations going around on social media this morning. I don't think that he was as outstanding as some people seem to believe, but he was good. And it was a solid, very competent performance, in my opinion, from a 17-year-old in the Premier League. In whatever way you look at that, that is significant. Him, Miles Lewis-Skelly, they've stepped up. They're helping. They're doing their bit. We were able to protect Declan Rice again, just giving him a few minutes. Alexander Zinchenko was back on the pitch, which I know he's not the best defender, but to have another body, another player that can play left back, another player that can come on and try and dictate from deep, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. And then you bring on your Jorginhos late on in the game and just make sure that you manage it right and you see it through and you see it out. And there's a lot to be pleased about. But the point I was making before I went off on a tangent there was, it wasn't the greatest performance. It was a very professional performance, but I don't think it dawned on me until I woke up this morning, actually, how significant that was and how that performance taught us so much about this Arsenal group and this Arsenal squad. So yeah, feeling pretty pleased, pretty happy. Get your questions in, by the way, in the live chat. I'd love to hear from you before we sign out. We've got plenty of time for questions today, so chuck them in the chat box. Also, if you're listening to us via the audio platforms, don't forget to leave us a review. It really, really does help. You can sign up to the Chronicles of a Gooner on Patreon if you'd like to support and get access to our matchday reaction pods. The most recent of which came out yesterday, about half an hour, 40 minutes after the full-time whistle. Check those out. When I'm at the stadium, they'll come from the stadium. When I'm not, they'll come from wherever I find myself. Yesterday, I wasn't at the stadium, but was still able to get you some reaction out nice and early. If you're watching us on YouTube, guys, please, please, please leave a like on the video. It really, 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 really helps. Really helps. More than you'd know, more than you'd believe. Subscribe to the channel as well if you're new, as we continue to move towards our next goal. We want to get to 40K on YouTube by the end of the season. That is the plan. That is the aim. That is, of course, the ambition. Just a couple of bits that I would like to highlight while you guys are getting your questions in. Gabriel Jesus has got a remarkable record in the Premier League. He's never lost a Premier League match in which he's scored in. Now, he's played 62, he scored in, I beg your pardon, 62 matches, which has resulted in 57 wins and 5 draws, 0 defeats. That's really, really incredible. And then I did want to have a little moan about something. It wouldn't be an episode of the Chronicles of Aguna without me moaning. Let's start the year as we mean to go on. Harry moaning. We always see these kind of Premier League directives, don't we, put in place at the start of the season. And Alexander Moneypenny of the Different Knock put this out on Twitter yesterday. I think he's absolutely right. We see things, don't we, like pulling in the box is going to be stamped down on them for the first few weeks of the season. It is absolute chaos. Everybody's getting penalized. People are outraged about it, and then it slows down, and we end up going back to something more like the state we found ourselves in previously. Then it was like, we're going to really punish diving and we're going to go hard on that. And then we're going to stop and we're going to wind it back because everybody gets upset about it and it causes controversy. At the start of this season, it was delaying the restart. Delaying the restart cost Arsenal 4 points because we had players sent off against Brighton and against Manchester City. We dropped 2 points that we wouldn't have dropped in either of those two games, in my opinion. And all of a sudden, nobody cares about delaying the restart. All of a sudden, referees allow you to flick the ball away, stand on top of a free kick, deliberately delay the restart. There's no punishment anymore. And that just really bloody winds me up, doesn't it? And it's one of those things that, it wasn't really what I was thinking about yesterday when, we were watching the game and as the game was unfolding. But when you look back on it, it's almost like retrospective annoyance and anger, at least for me. Anyway, but yeah, just wanted to get that out there. Okay, let's get some of your thoughts and some of your questions from the live chat. There's plenty to get into from you guys. Keep your questions coming, keep your thoughts coming. We'll do that next. Okay. On Ethan Nwaneri, Christoph says he was solid, more minutes in the bank for the lad, a great confidence booster for him that Mikel Arteta slotted him in as a starter for tactical reasons and not due to others being ill. Yeah, and I really liked Arteta's post-match interview where he said, obviously the talk is going to be about transfers, and we're going to jump on that bandwagon as well because we're going to bring you some transfer chat on a second episode that we're going to be streaming live this evening. It'll be available to download shortly after that as well, if you're a podcast listener. We're going to get into all that stuff. We're going to unpack all of that stuff. We're going to break it down. We're going to talk about prospective transfer targets and all the rest of it. But I really liked that when they tried to sort of shift the conversation from yesterday's performance and the likes of Ethan Nwaneri, Mikel Arteta said, it doesn't matter who I signed from what country, Ethan Nwaneri would have still played. That must give the lad immense confidence. And there was a time where we were all sitting here going, why doesn't he play more? He should have played more. And I still stand by that. I still believe that there was a point where he could have been thrown in Odegaard's absence. And, even if he failed, I don't think it would have massively impacted him as long as it wasn't allowed to go on for too long. I think that's really, really important. But yeah, I think we have managed him really, really well. I think the manager's managed him really, really well. And hopefully, his development continues in the way that it is because, he's a really talented man. Christoph also asks, is there any word on Tomiyasu? Mate, not as far as I know. I think he posted something to sort of celebrate the new year on social media where it just said more to come or something. But they've gone completely radio silent on Takahiro Tomiyasu. There is no update whatsoever. We knew that he was going to be out for a while, as always seems to be the case with Takahiro Tomiyasu. I really rate the player, I do, but how long can this be allowed to go on? Because if he's taking up a spot in the squad, and we've got a load of injury-prone defenders, which is making this even worse. Zinchenko's always out. Calafiori's injury-prone, as far as I can see, based on his time at Arsenal so far. Timber's someone that is susceptible to picking up an injury, more so after he'd done his ACL. And then you've got Ben White, who's out for a period of time. Nobody even talks about that. That's a massive miss for us. Massive miss. Jid says, we've lost our best player in Saka. He's talking about, we're bound to not have the greatest performances. What's important is we take points off these teams. The performances will come, but let's not expect 10 out of 10 every game. Yeah, and I don't think we were anywhere near a 10 out of 10 yesterday, but I'm still really, really happy. And I'm really, really happy because we dug in, we used the squad, we saw the power of the squad, and we got ourselves a much needed and very valuable result. Peshos says, Harry, why do a lot of people who talk about Merino, why are so many people talking about Merino being a flop? I don't get it really. And side note, Partey's in form. That's why I'd like to keep him as an option in our team, sort of the next Jorginho. Yeah, and look, but it's got to work for Thomas Partey, and it's got to work for the club, right? The contract that is on the table come the end of the season, if indeed there is one, it's got to work for everybody. Like, he can't be on a mega salary and, you know, not playing a big role. Like, for me, we've got a few of those players that are kind of on the border of that, like, and we can't have that with too many more. And I think it's more of a problem with Partey than a lot of others because of how injury prone he has shown himself to be over recent years. I've got no issue if he continues to perform well and Arsenal go at the end of the season, here's another year. But is that what Thomas Partey wants? Like, does he want to stick around, or will Thomas Partey look at it and say, well, I can go to Al Hilal or something and sign a mega deal for 3 years and basically, you know, make sure that, you know, my future and my family are really well looked after. I mean, they will be anyway, but you know what I'm trying to say. Afsar says, in the press conference, Arteta indicated that there will be no signings this January. Therefore, are you worried? I don't think he indicated that. He doesn't want to talk about it because there's nothing in the pipeline just yet. Maybe there is something in the pipeline and he doesn't want to reveal it yet. Like, I've learned, Afsar, and I think we all need to learn that Mikel Arteta does his utmost to give jack shit away in press conferences. Like, that's just Mikel Arteta. Like, whether it's team news, whether it's transfers, he's always going to do that. He's always going to try and just keep everybody and everything at arm's length. That's his way as a manager. He's not Harry Redknapp. You're not going to catch him pulled up outside somewhere with his window down, spilling all the club secrets. Like, that's just not Mikel. So yeah, that's for me just his way, and I wouldn't read into that too much. Evan says, just got back from my bike ride home after work in the States. Thanks for your nice takes to make it go by easy. Who is your pick for left back against Brighton after seeing Calafiori yesterday? Cheers, Harry. Thanks a lot, Evan, and I hope you enjoyed your bike ride. I mean, it's hard, isn't it? Because it feels to me like Calafiori's the left back for away games. He didn't exactly fill me with confidence defensively yesterday, but then has he ever? Like, I always look at Calafiori and think there's a mistake in there, but because of his sort of very bold way of playing, we do get other benefits, and it's about judging whether or not those benefits are worth the risk that comes with having Calafiori in at left back, in my opinion. With Timber suspended at Brighton, that's the problem. That's the big problem for me, because you know, we've got options now coming back at left back, like Zinchenko's there if you want to use him. I know a lot of people would say no. Lewis Skelly's obviously there as well. But on the right side now, we might have to drop Thomas Partey back in there for that game. And so that's my worry going into Brighton, rather than who's going to play at left back. Paul James says, do we need another defender to cover right back as well as another attacker? It's hard to say, Paul. Like, it doesn't, you know, Timber's suspended. He's not injured. How much longer is Ben White going to be out for? We don't really know. We don't necessarily have a midfielder outside of Thomas Partey that can slot into that position. It is a bit of a worry, the right back position, but we've got so many defenders on the books, man. It's just about getting some of them fit. And unfortunately, at the moment, there's a few of them that are just not available. And that's a big problem. I don't know that I'd go and sign a right back unless there was maybe a loan option available, someone that would be low cost, etc., etc. Jid says, we've shown in the past 3 seasons we're not lacking in goals. So where do you think the obsession of getting a striker comes from? Do fans think if we had a striker last season, we'd have scored 120 goals as opposed to the 91? Do fans not understand that our style of play isn't conducive for 30-goal strikers, but that would take away from the likes of Saka? I agree with that. I do. I agree with 99.9% of that. We wouldn't have scored 120 goals even if we had Erling Haaland up front. Completely agree. Our style of play is built for the goals to be shared, for us to be threatening in a number of areas rather than just through the middle. And I like that variation to our game. I just think it's every time Arsenal have a game where they don't score or they don't score enough, people go, oh, it's because they need a striker. That's the real basic analysis. Like, that's the easy thing to point to. Actually, I think it's a lack of creativity more than it is the lack of a finisher. So I would argue that if you really dive deep into this, we probably need another creator just as much as we need a striker. Do we have that killer in front of goal? No, we don't. And we all know that. And that's why, you know, when you look at the squad, you look at the makeup of it, you think it ticks a lot of boxes. That's probably the one it doesn't, right? So you obviously, you will look at that player, you will worry about why we don't have that type of player. And naturally, you'll want us to go and find one. So, yeah, it's tough. But I think we could do with the striker, but I don't think when in the games where we've drawn blanks or in the games where we've not been creative enough, I don't think just having an Erling Haaland is going to fix that. I think the problem is a bit wider than that. I think teams set up in a very specific way against us. A lot of teams seem to have nailed what you need to do. The mid block seems to work better sometimes than the low block, which in theory doesn't make a lot of sense. But when you watch the games and the way they've unfolded, it does. And yeah, striker, as Christoph says in the chat, is a shiny object word, like talisman. I like that. Somebody asked in the comments, because I said jack shit earlier, which I probably shouldn't have said, but it says, where does jack shit come from? I don't know. I always heard it growing up. No offense to anyone called Jack. Look, guys, I am gonna take one more. Arsenal Avenger. Do you think Brighton's style suits us? They will leave space. We need revenge for what happened at the Emirates. Yeah, Brighton will come and play us, especially at home. There's no doubt about that. If we can withstand their attacking threat, then of course you would fancy us, wouldn't you, to go out and cause problems ourselves, you know, in terms of what we can do to them and how we can harm them and how we can take the game to them. So it could suit us, you know, but it's a tough game. It's a tough trip and we got to be wary. We've got to be mindful. But at this stage, we're in the business end of the season now, guys. It is just about results for me. Performances will give you greater confidence and belief in that what you're doing results-wise is sustainable, but results are of paramount importance right now. And if we play 7 out of 10s every week, but we're winning, I don't think I'm going to complain too much. Anyway, going to leave it there. Thank you all so much for your support, for tuning in, for joining me on this Thursday morning, the first pod of 2025. You've been listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou, in partnership with NordVPN. Check them out, nordvpn.com/Chronicles AFC. If you're watching us on YouTube, please do leave a like on the video. It really does help. If you are listening on audio, please do subscribe and leave us a review as well. And we'll be back actually tonight, this evening. We're going to bring you a transfer stream, which will then obviously be released as a podcast as well, where we're going to talk about some potential options for Arsenal this January. And we're going to try and keep it realistic. We're going to try and keep it in line with what could actually happen, rather than saying, well, we're going to go and spend 200 million on X and 150 on Y, because I just don't think that's going to happen. We've got to be realistic, going to try and be realistic on that stream later tonight. Tune in for that one. I'll see you all then. Until then, take care of yourselves. Have a great day. Goodbye.